Hey, howdy, and welcome to the Big and Bright podcast. It's just me again, just Justice James. We had an episode ready to go, but somehow and some way there was no audio with our video, and then Nick was supposed to record another episode, but he got busy with family and school, and since he's not here to defend himself, I'm going to blame this entire debacle on Nick. So, thanks a lot, Nick. It's your fault. I know you're watching this. This episode is actually going to be very short because I'm just going to talk about one issue that came up over this weekend that I feel like we should at least speak on about Abbott's potential recommendation for pardon of a man by the name of Daniel Perry. But before I do, please like, subscribe, share, ring the bell, comment, ring the bell again, and then again, because I think once you ring it, you unring it. So ring it again, then share again, all those things. Now, over this weekend, a report came out that Abbott was recommending a pardon report to the Texas Board of Pardons and Parolees for a man by the name of Daniel Perry. If you don't know who this guy is, let me back up and explain what happened with this murder case. Daniel Perry has now just been convicted for murdering a man by the name of Garrett Foster. So, how do we even get here in the first place? Daniel Perry, who was a sergeant at the time, was stationed in Fort Hood, was driving Uber as a side gig. And he was driving as an Uber in July of 2020. If you remember 2020, the whole summer was basically the summer of love, summer of riots, fiery but mostly peaceful George Floyd riots / protests. Garrett Foster, he was a protester at this protest, and here's how they met. Daniel Perry was dropping off an individual to the protest that he didn't realize was occurring at the time until he got there. Well, he drops him off. He attempts to leave. This is where things get dicey. Garrett Foster was attending this protest with his AK-47 on a strap on him, which is completely legal in Texas. Daniel Perry was driving with his revolver as protection for when he picks up people and drops them off. Again, completely legal. But here's where it gets weird. Perry dropped off this person. Perry's car was then surrounded by protesters, and they started to beat on his car. During this, Mr. Foster has his AK-47, motions to Perry, allegedly to roll down his window. Perry sees this, feels threatened, shoots 5 times. Foster is dead. That is how we got here. The defense claims self-defense and under Texas Stand Your Ground law, which if you don't know, it allows a person to react to threats with potentially lethal force without fear of being prosecuted. I have a threat for my life. I protected that life. I shouldn't be in jail for being threatened. That's the claim. The prosecution claims that this whole thing was instigated by Perry, because he ran a red light in order to get to these protesters, and then he accelerated his car toward the protesters, which caused them to surround his car and get angry and start beating on his car. Now, without seeing much of the record, I really don't know what else there is besides the few reports that I have. You'll have the description in the description. I'll have the links and everything else. But this is just a conviction. The sentencing has not happened yet for the conviction. It's just the conviction of the actual murder. Sentencing, if you don't know, comes at a later date after a conviction. So until that happens, this is in purgatory anyways. Abbott decided to do it now to recommend to the board to review it. That way it's ready for when he does get sentenced, he can pardon him if that recommendation is accepted. But if you didn't know, Abbott himself cannot actually pardon on his own accord. Unlike the president, who has plenary power for federal crimes, he can issue a pardon for whomever he wants. Abbott, for the Texas governor, which is currently Abbott, he can only do this by a review from the board of pardons and parolees. What happens is the board recommends certain issues for pardons or other things. Abbott can sign it, Abbott can reject it, Abbott can do nothing with it, which effectively rejects it, as we all saw in the posthumous pardon recommended by the board for George Floyd for his crimes of drugs and other issues. Abbott decided not to sign it, which effectively rejected it, and then the board, of course, pulled their recommendation because they realized it had a lot of procedural issues that no one bothered to really cover, but here we are. That aside, that is how a pardon happens in Texas. So what Abbott is doing is expediting the issue for the board to review. And they will. They will review it, they will look at it, and they'll offer their recommendation one way or the other. So what do I actually think about this entire case? Well, after reading a few articles about this, which again are going to be in the description, I kind of think Perry got railroaded here. I kind of think a George Soros DA is picking and choosing who to actually defend and who to actually prosecute, and he's picking a guy who happened to shoot a protester that was for BLM riots. So it feels weird. But my biggest issue is, why were people in the street? Well, I mean, it doesn't say in the articles or report that they were in a crosswalk and he ran into them on the crosswalk when they had the right to be there. It says they were in the street. Why were they in the street? There's no reports about roads being blocked off, no reports about certain sections of the city that are strictly for protest and you can't drive on. Nothing. So they didn't have a right to be there, what it seems. And Perry did, because he's driving, which is the primary use for a road. So that's my biggest issue from the get-go. But also, these are allegedly protests, and I don't really know of many protests that have people beating the tar out of your car whenever you're in it. To me, it kind of seems very, very weird that it's peaceful protest, which is totally legal. That's not really peaceful to me, but what do I know? Just the law. But here's my biggest portion here. I don't know what I would have done if I was in Perry's shoes, because there's a lot of scenarios going on right now. I'm in my car. I'm surrounded by people that I know I can't run over, because that's murder. You can't do that just because you disagree with someone or they surround your car. Depends on the situation. I can't just run them over. However, in this situation, he may have had a chance just to accelerate and go and get the heck out of there, but he didn't. So he's a sitting duck in a car. He is then facing a barrel of a rifle in his face. Whether or not it's to motion to lower the window or not, that's a rifle in your face. And also, I'm not lowering a window for anyone who's motioning a rifle at me. To me, that just sounds like bad news bears. I don't want to figure out what chit-chat you have for me after you do that. And I don't care if it was loaded or unloaded. The reports don't say if it was unloaded, but so it tells me it's probably loaded. Either way, it's treated the same. I'm not going to wait to figure out if you have bullets in there or not. I'm going to react because you have a gun pointed at my face. So if I was in Perry's shoes, there's a good chance I'd shoot. I mean, you're kind of in a rock and a hard place. You can accelerate and hurt more people, or you can shoot the guy that has a gun pointed at you and kill him. I think either way, you're going to be facing some type of prosecution. You shouldn't if you're actually standing your ground. But again, George Soros DA, yeah. And I read an article about Texas Monthly, which I believe is going to be in the description. It's talking about how this is purely political. This is a law and order guy who's trying to get his name out and show that he's against those type of protests. I don't really see that claim. We were against it from the get-go. He provided police protection in most areas. I mean, even when there was a reaction protest to this, the police apparently arrested 40 different individuals during that protest because they got violent. I don't really see it as a political maneuver. I do wonder why this one, but this is kind of really the only one that exists in this type of frame. So it's kind of like if there's others, they probably do the exact same thing, or they haven't been actually taken to court because it was just this guy, this army sergeant. Kind of weird. But without knowing more information, I think I'm on the side of Perry, and I kind of agree with this recommendation. Again, this is only recommendation to the board. The board still has to actually fully recommend the pardon. So Abbott still may not get his way at all. He made this, so it may be a grandstand. Like, oh, I want this. Well, you're not getting it. Well, I tried, but I don't really see it as a grandstand. I see it as someone giving the rights back to someone who shouldn't have having the rights taken away. He was defending himself, hit a rifle point in his face, and he shot. I don't see the problem here. You don't get to point a rifle at me, expect no consequences. You play stupid games, get stupid prizes, is the saying that I've always heard. And also some outlets are calling this, like I said, purely political, but they're also saying this could cause more vigilante justice against somebody who disagrees with them in a protest. This is not at all what that means. He didn't just go out and shoot this guy. He was surrounded and felt threatened and then shot. He went through a lot of steps before shooting actually happened. So you really can't say it's vigilante justice. And it's really weird that they're worried about vigilante justice when apparently, according to stats, Austin is, safer than 5% of other cities in the United States. I think you have a lot more issues you need to start focusing on, and maybe you should, because it's really bad. Maybe want to focus on the actual crime first instead of focusing on this one guy who did a crime of legal justified shoot. Just my thinking. But anyways, that's all I have to say about that. I just wanted to kind of talk about this one subject because it's really big in the news, and some people are questioning how can Abbott do this, and maybe what's the parameters around it. Who is this guy? So I figured this little video could help show that. And even in this dark conviction of this Army sergeant, the stars at night are still big and bright. We'll see you next week.